September 16th, 2014, Hiawayi Robinson went missing, and our community was in shock that such a horrific. Since the moment she went missing, the Prichard Police Department, the FBI, the State Bureau of Investigation, the Mobile County District Attorney's Office, and countless other law enforcement agencies have been working.
Now, officials wouldn't go too much further into the details of this case.
Welcome back to crimedelvi. My name is Luca. Imagine you are an 8-year-old girl. One afternoon, you walk out of your house to meet your father, the person who is supposed to be the safest place in the world. Sounds pretty normal, right? A child meeting her father. Except, a few minutes later, that child mysteriously disappeared. But in this case, the most frightening shadow was not standing out on the street. It was standing inside the role society still calls the protector. Now, let's begin.
Hiawayi D-Iland Robinson was born on September 24, 2005. She was a cheerful, outgoing girl, the kind of child who was always smiling and easy to get along with. Her parents, Hiawatha Robinson Jr. and Yosha Populus, separated when she was still young. After that, Hiawayi lived with her mother and grandmother at the St. Stephen's Woods apartments in Prichard. St. Stephen's Woods was not an ideal place for a safe childhood. According to relatives, the apartment was often the site of adult gatherings, loud socializing, dice gambling, alcohol, cigarette smoke, and substance use. None of this happened behind closed doors. It took place openly, right in the common living areas, where Hiawayi played with her cousins. There was no clear separation between the adult world and spaces meant for children. Most of the time, Hiawayi was watched by her grandmother, Brenda Populus, but that supervision was very loose. She often sat in front of the television, drinking alcohol until she fell asleep, while Hiawayi moved in and out freely, left to entertain herself. On the father's side of the family, the grandmother, Merlene Robinson Howard, quietly carried responsibilities that should not have fallen on her. She regularly picked up Hiawayi, paid for school expenses, and took care of the girl when her parents were unavailable. Merlene said that whenever she came to Hiawayi's mother's apartment, she almost always saw Brenda there, and sometimes a few unfamiliar men. One of them was Mike Robinson, the boyfriend of Hiawayi's mother, a man with a history of domestic violence. At the end of the day, Hiawayi grew up in an environment with little oversight, little protection, and a lack of real adult presence. This was not an accident that happened in a perfect family. It was a tragedy planted very early on, in the very place that should have been the safest for a child. On September 16, 2014, just a few days before her 9th birthday, Hiawayi Robinson began the day like any other. Around 3:30 p.m., Hiawayi returned to the apartment at St. Stephen Woods after school. Because she had gotten wet in the rain, she changed her clothes. It was there that Hiawayi received a phone call from her father. He told her to come meet him at the apartment of a cousin who lived in the same complex. He also said he would give her $150 for her birthday, an early gift for the special day coming up. Hiawayi told this to Brenda, who was at home watching her at the time. Then, at around 4 p.m., Hiawayi left the apartment. Sometime later, Hiawayi's father called the apartment and spoke with Brenda. He asked where Hiawayi was and insisted that he had not picked her up and had not seen his daughter since September 12. What stood out was that within the next hour, he called 2 more times, asking the same question. After 10 p.m., when no one in the family knew where Hiawayi was, Brenda finally contacted authorities to report her missing. You see, it took many hours before a child was officially considered missing, and that gap in time later became a detail that deeply troubled many people. When police began the investigation, the first thing they did was speak with Hiawayi Robinson's family and collect every statement they could. Each answer was compared, each timeline was documented, and very quickly, one detail stood out. The cousin Hiawayi was supposedly going to meet said she was not home at that time. Here's the thing that directly contradicted the story Hiawayi had been told by her father. This inconsistency immediately shifted investigators' focus. The father was placed in a patrol car and questioned overnight from around 1 a.m. until 1:45 a.m. Throughout that time, one question remained unanswered. If Hiawayi never went to her cousin's apartment, then where did she go? During those hours, Merlene Robinson Howard stayed at the St. Stephen Woods complex, searching alongside Yosha and Brenda. They checked nearby apartments, knocked on the doors of familiar families, and asked whether anyone had seen Hiawayi after she left home the previous afternoon. The next day, authorities launched a large-scale search. Hundreds of people took part, including police, local residents, and volunteers from Class Kids, an organization that assists in missing children cases. The goal was clear: to find Hiawayi Robinson as soon as possible. The entire area around St. Stephen Woods was canvassed. Officers went door to door, asking neighbors whether they had seen the girl at any point between the afternoon and evening of September 16. K-9 units were deployed to track scent, while helicopters were used to scan vacant lots and abandoned structures near the residential area from above. Every accessible location was checked. Hiawayi's parents appeared on television to ask for help from the community. At this point, the investigation involved multiple agencies, including the FBI, the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, and the police departments of Mobile County and the city of Prichard. The worst outcome was finally confirmed. On the morning of September 18, 2014, a public works employee discovered the body of a young girl in a lot behind an abandoned building. The initial description quickly matched Hiawayi Robinson, who had been reported missing 2 days earlier. The victim was an approximately 8-year-old girl, nearly 1 meter tall. She was wearing a white and green Hello Kitty t-shirt, purple shorts, and her hair was braided with clear plastic beads. The body was found in an area of tall grass, where local residents often dumped trash illegally. The location was several kilometers away from the St. Stephen Woods apartment complex. She was lying on her back on the ground. Some of her braids had partially come undone. Her clothing was in disarray, and according to the crime scene examination report, her Hello Kitty shirt had been pulled up to her stomach, and her purple shorts and underwear were caught around one ankle, leaving the lower part of her body fully exposed. Investigators immediately secured the scene and began collecting evidence. During the processing of the area, they recovered several key items. On a nearby street close to where the body was found, they located 2 clear plastic beads, similar to those used in Hiawayi's braids, along with pieces of black tape. These items were immediately sent for forensic testing. The autopsy results later confirmed that the victim was indeed Hiawayi Robinson. Based on the initial assessment, she had passed away at least 24 hours before she was discovered. However, what stood out was that medical examiners could not determine a specific cause of death. There were no severe injuries visible to the naked eye on her body. After her identity was confirmed, the official search came to an end. The statewide missing child alert was canceled. But for the Prichard community, everything was only just beginning. News spread quickly. People who had taken part in the search gathered again at the places where they had previously met. Many broke down in tears. Some held each other in silence. As the forensic examination continued in greater detail, investigators found indications that Hiawayi had been sexually abused around the time of her death. However, investigators quickly faced a major limitation. Her body had been exposed to the elements for many hours in a heavily contaminated area. The biological samples that were collected were severely compromised, making reliable DNA analysis impossible. Put plainly, the most direct evidence for identifying the person responsible was no longer usable. Based on the remaining forensic findings, authorities concluded that the cause of death was asphyxiation. There were no obvious severe injuries visible to the naked eye. The cause was linked to forced positioning during the abuse. This indicated that the death was the result of an intentional act, not an accident. Investigators then turned to reviewing surveillance footage in the area around St. Stephen Woods, hoping to find any clues about Hiawayi's final moments. From recordings at a small shopping center and a store near the apartment complex, they identified a notable detail. Around the time Hiawayi left home, a red pickup truck was captured driving past the road in front of the store, turning at the corner. A few minutes later, Hiawayi appeared on camera. She walked into the store, briefly spoke with a woman standing in the checkout line, and bought some candy. Around the time Hiawayi left home, a red pickup was captured driving past the road in front of the store and turning at the corner. A few minutes later, Hiawayi appeared on camera. She walked into the store, briefly spoke with a woman standing in the checkout line, and bought some candy. And this was the key point. About 1 minute after Hiawayi left the store, the red pickup truck appeared on camera again. This time, it was traveling in the opposite direction, turning out from the same corner where Hiawayi had just gone, before returning to the main road it had used earlier. The surveillance footage was determined to have been recorded about 15 minutes before Hiawatha Robinson Jr. called Brenda later that day. That time window quickly became a critical point in the investigation. Earlier, it was Hiawatha himself who had called his daughter and told her to come meet him. But when Hiawayi did not return home, he called Brenda and insisted that he had never seen his daughter. 2 phone calls on the same afternoon, but with conflicting statements. Suspicion grew further when police confirmed that the lot where Hiawayi's body was found had once been a work site for Hiawatha several years earlier, before it was abandoned. This was not an unfamiliar place, but a location he had previously frequented. On the day Hiawayi went missing, Hiawatha was using his girlfriend's red Chevrolet Tahoe. The vehicle matched the description of the one seen on surveillance footage near the store where Hiawayi was last recorded, buying candy and appearing completely normal. Based on these leads, federal agents went to the home of Tasha Parker, Hiawatha's girlfriend, to conduct a search. she allowed them to examine the entire property. While reviewing footage from the home's security cameras, investigators noticed a striking image: Hiawatha walking past the frame, holding a pair of pants and keeping them held away from his body. The pants seen in the security footage were never located afterward. When investigators searched inside the house, they did not find any significant physical evidence. Inside the Chevrolet Tahoe, investigators discovered a clear hair bead that matched the shape and color of the beads recovered at the scene and from Hiawayi's hair. They also found several pieces of black tape. These small details, when viewed together, began to take on a different meaning. From that point on, the investigation gradually centered on Hiawayi Robinson Jr. as the primary suspect. Police continued to consider the possible involvement of others, including Mike Robinson, Yosha's boyfriend, a man known as J. Rob, who frequently visited the apartment, and the woman seen speaking with Hiawayi in the store surveillance footage. However, at that stage, those names remained only theoretical leads. The concrete evidence investigators had collected up to that point all pointed directly to Hiawatha. He was questioned multiple times, and his residence was examined thoroughly. At first, when his daughter was reported missing, Hiawatha appeared cooperative and willing to answer questions. Over time, however, that attitude began to change. He became more withdrawn, less cooperative, and showed clear signs of tension when dealing with law enforcement. During an interview with a federal agent conducted before Hiawayi's body was found, Hiawatha stopped answering questions and ended the interview. During one interrogation, Hiawatha said that on September 16, he told a co-worker that he planned to meet his daughter that afternoon to give her birthday money. According to him, this was a plan that had been discussed in advance. At the same time, Hiawatha insisted that the last time he had seen Hiawayi was on September 12. That was where the problem emerged. When investigators asked him to clarify that final meeting, his account began to show inconsistencies. Details changed between interviews, timelines did not line up, and what he said later did not fully match what he had stated earlier. Investigators did not rush to a conclusion, but they noted these contradictions as a significant factor, especially when viewed alongside the evidence already collected. As the investigation continued, the Prichard community began to mourn in its own way. In the days after Hiawayi's body was found, neighbors voluntarily returned to the lot where she had been discovered. Trash was cleared away, the grass was cut down, flowers were planted anew. Before long, the site became a spontaneous memorial for Hiawayi. People passing by stopped to leave candles, roses, balloons, and stuffed animals. On September 25, the National Day of Remembrance for Victims of Violence, the city of Prichard held a candlelight vigil dedicated to Hiawayi. There, Yosha stood and spoke about the pain of losing her daughter, remembering her as a bright child who loved Hello Kitty, enjoyed candy, and had a way of making anyone smile. On December 16, 2014, exactly 2 months after his daughter disappeared, Hiawayi Robinson Jr. was taken into custody by authorities. He was charged with murder and rape under Alabama criminal law. Under those charges, the potential sentence ranged from 10 to 99 years in prison. Hiawatha was held at the Mobile County Metro Jail and was scheduled for a court appearance the following morning at 10:30 a.m. Prosecutors assigned to the case stated from the outset that they would seek to deny bond citing the particularly serious nature of the case. Prichard Mayor Troy Ephraim later addressed the public, saying that while the community finally felt a sense of closure with a suspect in custody, the pain resurfaced in another way because the person accused of being responsible was the child's own father. Up to that point, most details of the case had not been made public. Many residents of Prichard were only then beginning to learn more about what Hiawayi had endured. Authorities explained that keeping information limited had been necessary, as hundreds of people were involved in the investigation, and they did not want to release any details before fear they were fully verified. Hiawatha appeared at the hearing, where the judge set bond at $500,000. After that hearing, Hiawayi Robinson Jr. was returned to jail to remain in custody. In January 2015, a subsequent hearing was held. At that time, all evidence collected at the scene, along with information investigators had gathered over the course of several months, was presented in court. Details about how Hiawayi's body was found, as well as the autopsy results, were read aloud publicly. For many of the victims' relatives, this was the first time they had to directly hear what had happened. The atmosphere in the courtroom grew heavy. Some people were visibly affected as descriptions of the scene were read aloud, because many of those details had never been made public before. On the defense side, Attorney Jeff Dean argued that prosecutors were building their case entirely on circumstantial evidence. He emphasized that there was no DNA evidence directly linking Hiawayi Robinson Jr. to his daughter's death. He also stated that people who knew the defendant and whom he had spoken with insisted they could not believe Hiawatha was capable of such violent behavior. After the hearing, however, prosecutors presented a very different view. They maintained that even without DNA evidence, the collection of circumstantial evidence they had was extremely strong. In their assessment, when considered together, those pieces of evidence carried even more weight than a single DNA sample. On the other side, Attorney Jeff Dean said he had suspected from the beginning that prosecutors did not have strong direct evidence to charge Robinson. In his view, the recent hearing only reinforced that belief. Dean appeared confident and said that what unfolded in court matched exactly what he had expected. Prosecutors, however, did not back down. They stated that the investigation was not over. A representative for the prosecution said FBI laboratories were still analyzing several key pieces of evidence. Some results were not yet complete, including samples related to the victim's clothing. Regarding the contaminated biological samples, prosecutors emphasized that this was not a failure of the investigation. According to them, situations like this occur far more often than the public realizes. Factors such as weather conditions, length of exposure to the elements, and natural decomposition can all seriously affect sample quality, making DNA analysis unreliable. A few days after that hearing, the case took another turn. This time, it involved a shotgun that had been seized during a search of one of Hiawatha's residences. Federal agents later charged Hiawatha with an additional offense related to weapon possession, and he was required to appear in court on that charge. The defense immediately objected. Attorney Jeff Dean argued that the shotgun had been seized illegally. His argument focused on the contents of the search warrant used by law enforcement. According to Dean, such documents require officers to clearly specify what type of evidence they are searching for. This requirement exists to protect citizens and prevent law enforcement from abusing its authority by seizing items unrelated to an investigation. In the search warrant presented at the time, the stated objective was to locate evidence connected to Hiawayi's case. The list included clothing, hair beads, black tape, and candy or candy wrappers. Similar to what Hiawayi had been seen purchasing on surveillance footage, there was no mention of any weapons. Under Dean's argument, this omission made the seizure of the shotgun a separate legal issue, distinct from the original scope of the investigation, and one that the defense said needed to be reviewed by the court. In response, federal agents offered a different explanation. They stated that the shotgun was not seized because it was directly connected to Hiawayi's case, but because Hiawatha was prohibited from possessing a firearm. Records showed that prior to this case, Hiawatha had a history of legal trouble. Between 2001 and 2011, he had prior convictions involving theft, illegal drug possession, and ongoing domestic violence. With that criminal history, federal law barred him from legally owning a firearm. For that reason, agents maintained that the seizure of the shotgun during the search was lawful. This became the basis for federal prosecutors to pursue the weapons charge against Hiawatha, separate from Hiawayi's case. Ultimately, Hiawatha Robinson Jr. was sentenced to 30 months in federal prison for those violations. Hiawatha Robinson Jr.'s case was later brought before a grand jury in September 2015. There, he was formally indicted on charges of murder and aggravated abuse of a minor. A judge was appointed to preside over the subsequent court proceedings. During this phase, all of the evidence collected by prosecutors was finally presented in court. Numerous witnesses testified, including individuals who spoke in support of and against the defendant. Family members and friends of the victim, as well as of the child's parents, took turns addressing the court. Attorney Jeff Dean focused his questioning on the environment in which Hiawayi lived while she was staying with her mother. Witnesses described a setting with inadequate supervision, where the child was often around multiple adults coming and going without strict oversight. In their testimony, they also mentioned Mike Robinson and J. Rob, two men who frequently visited Yosha Populus's apartment. In addition, these witnesses referred to the use of illegal substances inside the home, sometimes occurring in Hiawayi's presence. At one point during the trial, prosecutors stated that biological traces found on Hiawayi's clothing indicated that abuse had occurred. However, forensic experts were unable to identify the elements needed to conduct definitive DNA testing. As a result, that evidence could not be used to directly link the findings to a specific individual. Attorney Jeff Dean argued that this detail opened the door to multiple possibilities. According to him, the traces lacked sufficient scientific basis to support a conclusion and could not be treated as conclusive evidence against his client. The defense therefore maintained that this point should be viewed only as a hypothesis, not a determining factor in the case. After several days of arguments and a full review of all the evidence presented, the jury reached a different conclusion. In September 2016, Hiawatha Robinson Jr. was found guilty on all charges. Judge Charles Graddick sentenced him to 100 years in prison. Throughout the trial and up to the final moment, Hiawatha never accepted responsibility. He continued to deny causing what happened to his daughter. When the verdict was read, Hiawatha spoke out in protest. He claimed the sentence had unfairly taken away his right to be with his family and friends. He said he would not apologize for something he insisted he did not do, and declared that this was not the end. "Remember my face. You'll see me again. We'll meet again," he said to Graddick. The judge responded, "The only way you'll be back is from the inside." In delivering the sentence, the judge stated that he would use every authority available to ensure that Hiawatha Robinson Jr. would not have the opportunity to return to society for most of the remainder of his life. This was not a symbolic remark, but a definitive statement from the bench. After the trial, Yosha shared in an interview that the final sentence did not bring the sense of closure many people expect. According to her, the pain does not disappear. It only changes shape and sometimes becomes even heavier once everything is officially closed on paper. At present, Hiawatha Robinson Jr. is serving his sentence at Fountain Correctional Facility in Atmore, Alabama. According to records, he may become eligible for parole consideration as early as the year 2030. But for Hiawaii's family, that timeline carries little meaning. Some losses are never restored, no matter how long the sentence lasts. The case of Hiawayi Robinson is one of those crimes that a community cannot remain silent about. Because this is not just a tragic child case, it represents the complete collapse of something sacred. The responsibility of a parent. The man who was supposed to protect his child instead abused that position to commit acts that cannot be justified, then took her life as if it were the only way to conceal his wrongdoing. There are no words strong enough to fully capture the cruelty of that act. This was not a mistake. It was not a moment of lost control. It was a deliberate betrayal and a stark reminder that children can be at risk, even in the very place called family. But this case also exposes a broader lesson for the community. Child protection system failure does not come only from authorities. It also grows out of the silence of those nearby. When warning signs are ignored, when red flags are dismissed, when no one speaks up soon enough. Hiawayi Robinson's law was born from that loss, reminding us that protecting vulnerable children is a shared responsibility. Not to memorialize a tragedy, but to prevent the next one. And that is the deepest meaning left behind by this story. Justice for victims is not found only in a sentence handed down in court, but in the actions of all of us. This video is created for educational purposes and to raise public awareness about justice and child protection. It is not intended to exploit or sensationalize tragedy. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to continue with us in future true crime documentary, where every story is a voice for justice for children, for child protection, and for a world where every child is safe, cared for, and heard.